we like to every week bring to you, discuss the latest trends, topics, and those game changers in parenting, technology, and education. Most importantly, in sports and product reviews. So that's kind of where we are right now. So I'm just getting my bearings right here because we're going to start to do a deep dive into a couple of things. But I think Sandy has just joined the call, so we're going to bring her on right now. Hey, Sandy, how you doing?
Hey, Ted. Thank you for having me. I so appreciate it.
Hey, you're most welcome, and thanks for, joining us tonight and just, spending some time because I know you're busy and everything else like that. So I appreciate all the dialogue during the week where we were discussing your upcoming appearance.
Right. Well, thank you. I also wanted to thank you for publishing my blog on the 10 wrong things to say to a grieving parent and the 10 right. I got a lot of wonderful feedback, and I think it helps to enlighten people to those who are grieving. And there are so many things that parents who lose children go through, and one of them is hearing people and what they say when they're in the process of grieving the loss of a child. And I assume that that's where we want to jump right in.
Oh, yes, definitely. We're going to jump right in there. But I have to tell you, it was a pleasure posting your article. And, yes, a lot of positive feedback. I mean, personally, people were sending me messages on Twitter and in my email inbox about this. And I said, you know what, we have to get Sandy on. And I know you and I, we exchange emails back and forth just trying to make sure the dates synced up. But we're just glad to have you. So let's dig right in.
Okay, great. Well, I wrote a book called How to Survive the Worst That Can Happen, and it was just published this year. The reason that I wrote it is because when my son passed away several years ago, I was given a book and it was written by a parent who had lost a child, and it was so meaningful to me because unless you've experienced it, it's very, very difficult to relate to. And one of the things that was in this book was information about things that you'll be hearing and things that people say. And that really resonated with me. I wanted to be able to give and write a guide for parents, taking it step by step in the process of what it's going to be like in that first year or two of grieving the loss of a child. And in my book, I wrote very specific things to look for and do, and one of those chapters was the one that you had discussed on your blog, and that was the 10 wrong things to say to a grieving parent and the 10 right things. And so often we're sort of an open wound when it comes to losing a child. And so things that are meant in a very positive way to comfort or to help will often bring a lot of pain to a parent who's grieving. And so in the blog, I discussed that, for instance, there are many myths about grieving, and one of them is that time heals all wounds. Well, that's really a myth because time doesn't heal wounds any more than staring at a flat tire is going to fix a flat tire. Because when you lose a child or when you have any emotional loss, such as even divorce or financial loss, these are wounds that stay in the heart. And grieving is actually a wounded heart. It's not a wounded intellect. So time isn't going to heal a wounded heart. That's why I guide parents in my book to taking very specific steps for healing. So, should I continue with my discussing my book?
Oh, yes. Go right ahead.
Great.
The floor is wide open.
Okay. I actually lost my son very suddenly. He woke up with a fever one morning and was dead the next morning of bacterial meningitis. And it was such a shock because I had this belief that I had this fairy tale life. And what I learned when something like this happens is that no one is immune to bad things happening in their lives. And I had, 3 other children. My husband and I had been married for many years, and we thought that we had everything under control. But what I learned when our son died is that you have no control, and things like this, it's the spirit that it takes away so much of your belief in life and your faith and your spirit, and how do you go on day by day. Well, the things that I learned was that friends and family are your lifeline if you can allow them in. And it was, my friend, actress Melissa Gilbert, I'm not sure if you know who she is. She was Laura Ingalls in Little House on the Prairie.
Little House on the Prairie, correct.
Yeah, she wrote the foreword for my book. And I asked her to write the foreword because she's my best friend. And she walked me through that time of grieving. And I couldn't have done it without her and my other friends that were so helpful in surrounding me with protection and love and nurturing me through this time. And in nature, elephants, female elephants will surround a wounded elephant until she can stand on her own. And that's the way I felt, so supported by my friends and family when this happened. And I felt that this was my lifeline. This was a way that I was going to survive, was by admitting that I needed help. And that was very hard for me to do because I was one of those people that I always wanted to help everybody else, but if anybody asked me how I was doing, I would say, oh, I'm fine, even though I wasn't. And I had to sort of learn to embrace people and let them give to me during that time, because that was my gift to them, was allowing me to be helped. So anyway, I asked Melissa to write the foreword, and I think she gave a beautiful overview of what she saw as an observer. And I think that so many people know her and love her from Little House on the Prairie. It was a very relatable person that could give perspective to the story. And she also works diligently for Children's Hospice and has seen many parents go through really tough times. So anyway, I'm just thrilled that she was part of my book, and I'm watching my book sort of go out there and find its way to parents who are grieving right now.
Gotcha. Totally understand. I do have to say, Sandy, just the things people should never say to a grieving parent. I mean, I was just amazed as we were getting ready to publish the blog. Because I'm sitting there and I'm reading it, and I was taken back by it, just like, really? And then you find out, and I'm being truthful right here, you find out some of the things that possibly you might say, not even thinking about, stepping into someone else's shoes. So that's the one thing I did notice with, the posting your blog. And it was like, I was like, oh my goodness, this is so true. And it's, you don't want to say some of this stuff is cliche, but it really touched my heart when I was reading it. I said, oh my. I said, I just caught myself saying about 10 times. I said, yeah. I said, I've heard that one before. And just being on the receiving end. Being on the receiving end of it, Sandy, is like you feel like you're hit with a ton of bricks.
Yeah, that's very well put. Shall I read a couple of the things that I have in the blog? Would that be helpful? Okay.
Definitely.
And by the way, these are all things that people say with good intention, and that's what I advise parents who are struggling to understand, that these are attempts for people to reach out to you and to make you feel better. And along with the 10 wrong things, I have the 10 right. So I'm just going to go through the list sort of quickly, because I know we have limited time. For one, time heals all wounds. I explained that one a little bit earlier. I heard a lot people say, oh, he's better off. He's with the angels now. And as a parent, you say, no, he should be with me. I'm his mom.
Right. Right.
The third one
Andy,
is, I know.
Andy, I have to jump in. Take your time. No need to rush. We have 10 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Then the third one is, I know how you feel. And everybody's grief is unique, and everybody's loss is unique. So even though I may share the loss of a child with another woman who has also lost a child, her experience with the loss of her child is different than mine. For instance, maybe she lost her 32-year-old child, and I lost my 16-year-old child. It's a whole different set of circumstances that go along with these types of losses. So you can't really compare losses. It's very difficult. The fourth one is, he's in a better place now. Well, we don't really know. And that is so wounding, because I remember thinking that I gave my son the best life I could. And
Correct.
It doesn't feel like he's in a better place, because he should be in my home. I'm his mom. Right. And then the fifth one is, well, at least you're young enough to have more children, or at least you have other children. I think that's the hardest one of all, because if you can imagine replacing one child with another, just because you have one child doesn't mean that that child replaces the one who's gone. The love doesn't get replaced. And it's a huge hole. And if anything, it makes it harder, because your focus is solely on the child who has died. And so you have to force yourself, and I talk about this in my book, how important it is to focus, if you do have other children, to focus on the fact that they are grieving. They need your attention, but you have to compartmentalize when you're grieving and recognize when they're grieving. And it's so important. I give some suggestions in my book about that. The sixth one is, some people are just not meant to have a long life. Well, when it's a child, everyone deserves the opportunity to live a long life. Every human deserves that opportunity. So it doesn't feel good that, just because maybe this child was only meant to live 16 years, 3 days and 10 months, like my son. So that one is also very difficult to hear. Here's another one. God never gives you more than you can handle. Well, what this does is it makes grieving an overwhelming responsibility for the mother who's grieving or the father who's grieving. Because, wow, I have to be so strong, because God doesn't give me more than I can handle, so I must be the strongest person in the world, or at least I have to pretend to be the strongest person in the world. And then you go into Academy Award grieving, where, you're afraid to show people that you're really struggling, and then you don't get the help that you need. So that one also is very difficult. Another one is, things like this make you stronger. Well, a grieving parent doesn't feel strong. That's the last thing a grieving parent feels, is there's no strength. It takes every ounce of strength to wake up in the morning and to adjust to the fact that your child is gone. And so that one also is very, very difficult. The ninth one is, I know your child struggled with mental illness, or I know your child struggled with pain or cancer or whatever it is. This is for long-term illness. At least he's no longer suffering or in pain. Well, that's not a reason why we should be not grieving his loss, because parents never give up. Parents never want their child to leave this earth. And even I've spoken with parents whose children have had long-term illnesses, and, it can be 6 or 7 years, and they still want to hold their child and have one last hug and one last word and one last good night. So that's a very hard one to absorb as a parent who loses a child. And then finally, number 10, I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't want to remind you. I heard that a lot, which is,
oh my goodness,
which is, if you can imagine, as a grieving parent, the loss is always in the forefront of your mind,
right? Especially
the first several years, and so those are the things that it's so surprising when people say that, because it's always there. It's every conversation is in that fog of grieving, and you're aware, and it's like every thought reverts back to the fact, oh, my child is gone, even though you're trying to find laughter or you're trying to have dinner with someone. It's always there. So that doesn't really work either. But as I said, one thing that I advise parents to do is to understand why people are saying them, and that's to be helpful, to be compassionate, to try and show some strength. And so my advice is to say these suggested things.
Right.
If you hear that someone who's lost a child, the first thing would be, I'm so very sorry. And that allows the parent guard to just relax a little bit, like, oh, you get it. Another one is, I can't even imagine how devastating this is for you. Well, that also lets your guard down, and it makes you feel loved, and it makes you feel like maybe their heart gets it, that their heart is aching for you, and they get it, they understand. The third one is, and this was so helpful to me, I want to help you in any way I can. May I bring dinner next week? Now, when you're going through a grieving process, it's very hard to even think of the meal at night, or how to go to grocery shopping, or how to put food on the table, because all you're thinking about is you're in pain. And so when someone says, I'll bring dinner, that's the best thing you can do, because if you say, let me know if you'd like me to bring dinner, then you have to start thinking, oh my gosh, I have to plan, I have to make a phone call, I have to ask them to make dinner. That is even overwhelming.
Yeah. It cannot be open-ended. You have to go in there and make that statement.
Yes. The other one is, your child was a gift to so many, and I'm one of them. And that was just such a comforting thought, because I would hear stories about my child and how meaningful my child was to them. And that was so powerful for me to hear that. And then they would usually follow with a story of how much my child meant to them. The fifth one is, I think about you every day, and I can't imagine how difficult this must be. Well, again, you feel comforted and surrounded in love, and that allows the grieving parent to just sort of sink into your comfort, and it's so peaceful. The next one is, you're in my prayers, and I'll tell you, that is so meaningful, and even a parent who's grieving often will question faith. That's one of the things that does happen, but just hearing you're in my prayers is also like a warm blanket. It's very, very powerful. Number 7 is, my heart breaks for you, and I want you to know I'm here. I'm here for you. And again, that's like a warm blanket that comforts you. And if you notice, these are all very short, immediate answers that allows the grieving person to be able to speak and feel your love. The next one is just putting your hand on theirs and giving them a hug and say, I'm very sorry. What can I do to help you? And then maybe maybe they'll say, I can't even get to the post office. I can't pick up my children. What can you do? And then offer to pick up the children or to go grocery shopping. The 9th is, keep my phone number handy and call me anytime, even if it's in the middle of the night. I cannot tell you how many of my girlfriends said that. And I knew, and Melissa was one of them, I knew that I could call her in the middle of the night and say, I can't do this. And she would pick up the phone and be there for me. And, that was just, that was a lifeline. That was a lifeline for me. And the 10th is just say nothing and offer them a compassionate look, a gentle touch, and an open heart, and give them the gift of letting them talk freely about the loss of their child. And there is nothing better and nothing more wonderful than being able to share a story about a child who has passed. And, that just brings, again, a good deal of comfort. So those are my 10 wrong and 10 right. And I guess if I could offer some hope for people that are going through this horrible, horrible tragedy, is that it seems impossible to survive such a loss, but you will get to a point where you'll notice that the days in between the time of grieving get a little bit longer. First, you'll notice that maybe you hadn't cried in 2 hours, and then maybe it's 2 days, and then maybe it's 2 weeks, and you just have to celebrate those little losses. But I'll tell you what this kind of thing does teach you is to make every day count. And we cannot control the destiny of our children or the lives of our children, but what we can do is love them right now, and every day tell them how much you love them, and look them in the eye when you do it, and never take it for granted.
Sandy, I can't thank you enough for coming on to the show tonight. We have to get back together and do this again. If you can let our listeners know what the best ways to get in contact with you.
Oh, my website is my name, sandypeckinpah.com, and that's Sandy. Peckinpah is spelled P as in Paul, ECKINPAH.com, like the film director Sam Peckinpah, spelled just like that.
Got you. Sandy, we want to give you a round of applause. Thank you so much. We will be in touch, okay?
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
That was Sandy Peckinpah,